Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, COVE students. Um, we are back at it again with another teach for this week. And it's a pretty exciting one. As you guys know, the last month, every Sunday in the past July, we've been posting videos about Judges. And we mainly we're doing that because we really enjoy that story. We really enjoy the story of Judges. But it is a sad one. It is a sign of Israel kind of starting here with God and slowly working its way down by going through these cycles. And one of the main things that we see in Judges, is that by the end of the story, hundreds of years of Judges, by the end of it, the Israelites are in a much worse spot than when they started. They are further away from God. These cycles have gotten them further away from God. And we will see this cycle that we've been talking about. I guess I go this way. We will see this cycle that we've been talking about in Judges in the rest of the story of Israel. And really, like what we were trying to teach to you guys is that this cycle is still prevalent in our lives today. We still find ourselves falling into traps, falling into sin, and getting stuck in places that only God can bring us out of. And that's ultimately the story of Judges. But it's time to move on to a new portion of the story. It is not the next book in the Bible, but it is the next part of the story, chronologically speaking. And as you look in the Old Testament, it's not chronologically put out in order. Instead, it's broken up into sections. So we are getting into 1 Samuel, and we are going to be there for the foreseeable future, which we are excited about. And we chose to do this because we are really enjoying sticking in the Old Testament, and we love the story of Samuel. Samuel is one of my favorite characters, and 1 Samuel is probably one of my favorite books in the Old Testament, and probably one of my favorite books of the Bible. Me, in particular, I loved reading like the Chronicles of Narnia and like sci-fi fantasy stories. I always enjoy that. I love movies like that. And I think that 1 Samuel particularly is just another one of those books. Now it's real, and I believe that everything in it is true, and it is there for a reason. It is there to see, for us to see God clearer. And there's a lot of really interesting and incredible stories that are very revealing to God's character. But along with that too, it's just the way it is written and the story that is told in this book is just fun and exciting. And you get to see the rise of David, and the rise and fall of King Saul. And it's just a cool chronicle of Israel at a very important time in their nation. It's the start of when they finally started getting kings. And we'll see that it was unfortunately a process that God did not approve of. And so we will continue to see the sins of Israel in the book of 1 Samuel. But we will also see how God worked through flawed people. And that is what we've really seen throughout the entire Bible, and what you will continue to see as you read along in the story. God continues to use flawed people. And it's important for us to know these stories and refer back to them and to learn from them. So for the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at the character of Samuel. 1 Samuel doesn't start right away with the kings of Israel. It takes about 8 or 9 chapters until we get into the kings. But the first few chapters are about the nation of Israel and Samuel. And actually, the first story that we're going to look at is in chapters 1 and 2. And it's not even really about Samuel. Instead, the story really starts with Samuel's mother, Hannah. And maybe you guys don't know the story, but we will see how God works through Hannah in this story. And it is a beautiful one, because Hannah is a woman who is married but cannot have kids. And this is often the type of situation we see women of the Bible in. Hannah had this problem. Sarah had this problem. And it continues to be a problem throughout, of barren women not being able to have children. And this was a heartbreaking this was a heartbreaking situation. It still is a heartbreaking situation today whenever you see couples that are struggling to have kids. But even more so, it was even more of a difficult situation in the time of the Old Testament, in Hannah's time, simply because women, one of their main goals, one of their main objectives that was just put on them from society. I'm not saying that it was right, but just where they got value was how many kids they were able to produce. So if you were a barren woman, if you were a woman that couldn't find a husband, or if you were a woman who had children out of wedlock, who had children outside of the realm of marriage, you were seen as like the lowest of the low in society. And so Hannah was seen as this. And her husband, Elkanah, which is not a name you hear nowadays, he had 2 wives. And his first wife was able to have kids. Her name was Peninnah. So Hannah and Peninnah. Elkanah married Hannah and Peninnah. And Peninnah had multiple kids. Meanwhile, Hannah couldn't. And in the beginning of the story, we see that Hannah is Elkanah's favorite wife. And Elkanah is always kind of serving and loving her. But Hannah is very clear with what she wants, and she wants a child. She wants somebody to she wants a kid of her own. And during this story, we will see, I'm not going to read most of it just because I'm just kind of giving you a quick synopsis of it. Naturally, Hannah and Peninnah, sorry, the name is just so strange. Hannah and Peninnah were rivals, mainly because Peninnah would provoke her and instigate, because she would just brag about being able to have children. Meanwhile, Hannah couldn't. So Hannah already had to deal with the struggles of not being able to have a kid, not being able to satisfy her husband by giving him children from her, to deal with all the society implications of not being able to bear a child. She had to deal with all of that. But on top of that too, Elkanah's other wife was able to have children. And so she was reminded every single day, either by the presence of those children or by Peninnah, that she was unable to have kids. This was the thing that she wanted most in her life. And at one point, they find themselves at the temple, and Hannah wasn't even eating. She was just praying. And Elkanah was so worried about her, asking her why. And it came out that she was just distraught. And she found herself at the temple. And so the temple, at this point in time, it actually wasn't the temple, it was a tabernacle. So it was a dwelling place of the Lord, and it was set up in a tent. It was the same tent that was moved in the promised land moved in the wilderness into the promised land. The tent that Moses built, the tabernacle from Exodus. And it was placed in Shiloh. It wasn't in Jerusalem yet. So another thing that we will see in the story of 1st and 2nd Samuel is the process of the tabernacle being put to Jerusalem and then made into a temple, which is really cool as well. But people would go there annually to pray and to give sacrifices to the Lord for their sins. And so Hannah was there praying, and finally she gets up and says, "Lord, if you give me what I want, I will make sure to devote my son or daughter's life to you. I will give him right back. I just want the experience of having a child, and I want to be able to give something to you. And what better than a servant?" So she prays this to the Lord, and the priest Eli at the time sees this, and he sees how intense she is praying. She sees how much of an out-of-body experience Hannah's having while she's praying, and he thinks that she's drunk, which is so funny because we see this happen a few times in the Bible, particularly in Acts 2. The disciples, once Jesus leaves, the disciples wait for the Lord to come on them, the Holy Spirit to come on them. When they finally do, they are acting in ways that seem drunk. And so oftentimes in the Bible, when people are having these close experiences with the Lord through prayer, or just having these experiences like in Acts 2 as well, people who are looking outside of this experience see what they're doing, and they assume that they are not sober. They assume that they are drunk, and they tell them to stop drinking, to put away the wine. And so that's what Eli does. He tells Hannah, listen, you need to put away the wine. This is a place of the Lord. You can't be drinking here. Because Hannah was praying so intensely that her mind was working so much that no words were coming out. Like, there was no sound coming from her. She was moving her lips, but there was no sound coming. Um, and so Hannah replies to him and says, I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief. So while she was at the temple in the presence of the Lord, Hannah was taken to a point where she was experiencing intense grief and anguish. And that was coming out through her prayer. And Eli could see that. And so Eli, being the high priest, sees the situation that Hannah's in, and he blesses her and says, hey, go home, and I'll pray that the God of Israel will grant what you're asking of him. And sure enough, guess what happens? Hannah gets pregnant. Hannah has a son, and she names him Samuel. And we see at the end of chapter 1, she dedicates Samuel to the Lord. Her response immediately is, I'm going to give this child to the Lord. And so as soon as Samuel was of age, I think he was just a young baby. It says after he was weaned. So at the youngest age possible, where the child did not need his mother, Hannah sends Samuel back to the temple to work with Eli. And along with that too, she sends a bowl and a ton of other valuable resources to the temple as a sign saying, Lord, I asked for you for something and you gave it to me. And I know through this experience that what you gave me is ultimately yours. So I'm giving this person back to you. So I want to ask you guys a question. What is it that you guys want most in this world? It could be a kid. Maybe it is a son. At your age, I really wanted to be a dad. I had such a great experience or relationship with my own father and my mother. I couldn't wait to have a family of my own. So that's probably the thing that I've wanted the most my entire life. But what is the thing that you want the most in your life? Maybe it's a new phone. Maybe it's something completely different. Maybe it's a car. Maybe you're excited to be of age to drive. Maybe it's a new TV or a new game system. Whatever it may be, what is it that you want most in this world? And now I want to ask you, are you willing to realize that whatever you have in this world is given to you by God? Are you willing to possibly sacrifice those things to the Lord, to give it to him, like Hannah does? We see this whole chapter. If you want to read it, you will see the anguish, and you will be able to sympathize with Hannah because she wants a child so badly, and the torment that she is living just because she can't have a kid. We see how badly she wants one. And the moment she finally gets it, she realizes that it is a gift from the Lord, and she gives it back to God. And we'll see later on, so after she has this kid, Hannah gives this prayer that's beautiful, and that's in chapter 2. But we see later on in the story in chapter 2 that when Hannah went home after she gave Samuel to the temple, she was able to have kids. She had 3 sons and 2 daughters, so she was able to have 5 more kids because the Lord blessed her after the experience she went through, after seeing how badly she wanted a son, giving her a son, and then seeing her give back. The Lord continued to bless her. It wasn't the only child that she had. She had 5 more. Now, I'm not saying that the exact same thing will happen to you. Like, when you finally get your phone, give it to the church, and then God will give you a phone and an iPad and all these things. That's not what I'm saying. Instead, what I'm saying is we need to realize, and this is what Hannah realized as well, that whatever is given to us is given to us by the Lord. And in turn, we should be looking at our bank account or at our room full of our things, our own possessions. We should be looking at those things as not our own, but as the Lord's. And asking yourself, how can I use these things? How can these things that I have, these things that I want but also have that the Lord has given me, how can I use these things to glorify the Lord? Hannah did the ultimate move of glorification of the Lord by giving her son to the temple, by giving her son in servitude over to the Lord. And we see the immediate blessing that had in her life because, one, she was able to see Samuel at least once a year whenever she would go back to the temple and see him working. But along with that as well, the Lord blessed her in that he gave her sons and daughters, something that she was unable to do before that. And another cool thing is the Lord blesses the rest of Israel with Samuel. And he blesses you and me today with the servitude of Samuel. Samuel's work, because he is in service of the Lord, goes on to bless an entire nation of people and generation after generation, because it is written down for us to read today. And this is happening because of Hannah's dedication to the Lord, because of Hannah's recognition of what the Lord had given to her, and her sacrifice to give her son away to the Lord. We are now blessed with this story. The people of Israel were blessed with the presence of Samuel, because Samuel goes on to be this leader that Israel really needs at a pinnacle moment in history for Israel. Samuel is there to lead the way. Samuel becomes a prophet and a judge as well, and we will see that as the story of 1 Samuel unfolds. But like Deborah, the first judge that we looked at a few weeks ago, Samuel is also this prophet/judge, the last judge of Israel, and the man who ushers in a time of kings for Israel. But he answers to one person alone, and that's the Lord. And that's continually what he does throughout his life. He is led by God, and he becomes a leader of Israel and a leader of kings because of that. And a lot of this, and a lot of credit goes to Hannah and her dedication to the Lord. So as we close up today, I want you guys to think about that. What is something that you want most in this world? Maybe it's something I said earlier, or maybe it's not. But how can you use that to glorify the Lord? Can you see that all the things that you have is given to you by the Lord, and ultimately it really isn't yours? A good example of that is money, right? Everybody has savings. Everybody is trying to save money. But the Bible calls us to give a certain portion of our money to the Lord. In the Old Testament, I believe it starts with Abraham, this idea of tithing, giving 10% of what you have back to the Lord. And then the Old Testament kind of refreshes that and says, like, you don't really need to give a tithe, you don't need to give 10%, but instead you need to get right with the Lord and realize that the money that you have isn't your own, but it is a gift given to you by God. So how much do you need to give back? Now, money is a good example, but that really should go for everything that we have. We should realize that everything that we have been given is not ours, but the Lord's. And so what portion of that do we need to give back to God? So I'm going to close this there. And as we look at the rest of 1 Samuel, I'm so excited to study this book with you guys, because it is one of my personal favorite books, and there's a lot of very cool stories. And we'll get to look at Samuel as a minister. And the next story that we'll see is Samuel as a young kid experiencing God. And so we will cover that next week. So let me pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for giving us everything that you give us, Lord. What we want and what we don't want, Lord. And I pray that we can look at everything that we have been given, Lord, and realize that it is ultimately yours. And I pray that we'd be sacrificial like Hannah, to give away the stuff that you've given to us, to give back to you what you've given us, so that people can be glorified, so that we can be blessed by it, Lord. So I pray that you can give us the discipline to look at what we have, and to have the discipline to maybe give those things away, Lord, and to see you bless those things. I thank you for being our ultimate provider, and I pray that as we continue to look through 1 Samuel and the story of these kings, Lord, I pray that we can see your hand and your love in their lives, but also ours as well. And it's in your name I pray. Amen. So just a couple quick announcements. This Wednesday, we will not be meeting online or in person. But then the next 3 Wednesdays in August, we will be meeting in person at the Lake Forest parking lot at Christ Church from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. So we'll just be having normal COVE outside. The high school leaders will be there, I will be there, and we're super excited to have you. And we will continue to have COVE Hangouts on Fridays as well at 4 o'clock. So if I said something today that confused you, or if you have any questions, please come at 4 o'clock. I've been releasing the links on the Remind code as well as on the newsletter for those. So make sure to stop by to that, and I hope to see you guys soon. Have a great week. Bye-bye.